Hello, everyone. Welcome back to I See Melanie. Today, we're here to talk about the fourth episode of the Talamasca called Wet Work. So, this is a video I'm shooting during my lunch break, so I'm going to go through things very quickly and efficiently with you all. So, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Hype up the video so it gets out to more people who are watching this show, part of the Anne Rice Immortal universe. So in this video, I'll break up the discussion around different topics or themes and characters, and we'll just go through things like that. So let's talk about the Talamasca. Of course, I've been saying this entire time, obviously a lot is wrong with them. So anybody who is actively working with the Talamasca or at the Talamasca, with the exception of our guy, because I am a guy apologist, I have come to learn they're all so corrupt. So, of course, we meet those vampires who are working with Raglan, and we know they're unscrupulous because they're selling out their own by harvesting the blood of that poor ancient. Raglan, again, I didn't have an entire read of him from Interview with the Vampire, but now we know that he is corrupt. He and Helen are doing their own side dealings. So I am convinced at this rate that everybody in the Talamasca is really ultimately working for themselves and using the cover or using the protection and the backup of Talamasca to, do the work that they're supposed to do, with the exception of Cyprian from, what's that show called? Mayfair Witches. Oh, and I should also say, of course, I'll be making reference to Interview with the Vampire and a little bit of Mayfair Witches because we're all part of the same universe. And so Helen, when she goes to see her old friend, and she's asking nicely, like, could you help me out? I'm so lonely. You have your sister. I don't have mine. Could you help me? And that lady, who I forget her name, she says no. And then Helen's like, you know what? I could bring the Talamasca in on you. And of course, her sister comes in and jumps in and saves the day. And I'm really curious to know if the people in Amsterdam seem to know about this or have a problem with it, because that one woman that guy points out wearing that fancy trench coat, she just gave kind of like a stern mom kind of look to Raglan. She didn't look like she was about to pull him up on anything. And later on, Raglan basically says, like, oh, that woman, like, she's, what is she going to do to me? She's not going to do anything to me. But we'll talk more about Raglan and Helen later on. Let's talk about Helen now. So the woman that she met up with, clearly she and or her sister are supernatural, perhaps they're witches. And again, when Helen intimates that she's going to get the Talamasca after them, the lights go out. I think there was like a breeze in the room, and the other sister, who again, I'm assuming she's a witch, she again says, why are you working for the Talamasca? They are corrupt. So once again, another supernatural being has disdain for the Talamasca. And Helen basically says she's trying to fix things from within. I don't believe that. Unless she stumbles across something that, that could guarantee that Talamasca is going to go down, that she's going to be okay, maybe, but she's doing it for herself like everybody else. And so when the one friend passes her the note and it says Jameson equals Melville, again, I have no idea what that means. And Helen sent it back to the Talamasca in New York for them to decipher it. So I guess we'll find out pretty soon. And so who do you think is watching Helen? Who put those fresh flowers by her parents' graveyard? We get the idea it's not her sister, because that gravekeeper didn't see a woman who looked like Helen. So it's somebody else. So it's somebody letting her know that they're watching her. It could be the Talamasca themselves, or maybe some benevolent person or a malevolent person. Who knows? But if you have any ideas as to who's stalking Helen, put them in the comments section. Let's talk about Jasper and Guy. I actually quite enjoyed their interaction. I thought they had a cute dynamic. Jasper was almost like Guy's uncle, looking out for this hapless young man who has no idea what he's gone himself into. So I thought it was quite endearing, their interaction. And Jasper just seems very fond of Guy, and he told him his real beef with the Talamasca. So in essence, the Talamasca aided in some vampire on vampire beef that led to his coven in Bolivia being massacred, and so he no longer had a home. He no longer had a family and a base. And then he went to Texas, and at that point he was turned there. So he said he was in Texas in 1920. Texas and Louisiana are very close together. So I wonder if Lestat had any interaction with him, if he ever saw him. I don't think Louis did because Louis, he was a reticent vampire. I don't think he talked to anyone other than, his family and his household. But yeah, curious. I don't really think so necessarily, but I thought it was interesting the proximity between Texas and Louisiana. And also, I'm very curious to know how a mortal and immortal coven works. I thought that there was a bit of a supremacy idea that vampires had, that these mortals are so much lower than them. But I guess in some ways, or maybe that's just an old thing, it's not really present anymore, that the mortals and immortals are just coexisting and living as a family. So if you have any thoughts about that, I'd love to hear them. Now let's talk about that big operation where Guy goes to the Westcroft Hotel to get the 752. So Jasper, again, he doesn't have it, he wants it, and he tasks Guy with getting it because Jasper can't go. And if Guy finds it, he can find out information about his mother and her whereabouts potentially, and they can reunite. But of course, Jasper set up Guy with some backup in the form of Checkers, the revenant vampire. So yeah, it was very interesting. Again, like last week when we saw him kill Checkers and put him in the mud, I guess when there's a revenant vampire, it needs to kind of germinate a little bit. So now that he's been in the mud for a little while, he's this zombie-esque looking vampire. And I would love to know Jasper's system and how he gets the remote control, essentially, the clipper, to control this revenant vampire. And it also got me thinking to the finale of season 2 of Interview with a Vampire, when we see the narration about Louis' time in the crypt, and there's a lot of B-roll, and we see Armand feeding a ghoul slop, right? So this person, he is kind of turned because I believe his eyes are a bit, stained glass window-y, but he's eating food of some sort. It looks disgusting, but it's not blood. So I'm wondering if Armand had revenant vampires too that he used to, I don't know, do exactly what in Paris, but possibly, who knows. But going back to Checkers, now he's being effective in what he's been tasked to do. I guess technically now he doesn't work for the Talamasca, not really, but he's a good employee and he came in clutch for our guy. Okay, at the hotel, we see Guy and Raglan meet, and Guy finally looks a bit more kempt. Jasper hooked him up with some nice, a nice coat. It's fitting him well, and he looks, his clothes look better than they did before. And so again, he meets Raglan, and Raglan is always so shifty. He's always been really shifty. And so when he decides, or he understands, okay, this kid, he can read minds, and he, just plays along, lets Guy come with him to this transaction where he thinks he's going to get the 752. He lets him come in and uses him as the a bargaining chip, or uses him as an exchange. Because I did think it was kind of weird that these vampires wanted cash from Raglan. I would think a vampire, they have so much money, access to money. They've got this hotel where they launder as a front, essentially. But Jasper did mention that those vampires saw a lot of, Madonna's ex-husband's movies. I'm forgetting his name right now. Guy Ritchie movies, I think he said. So I guess they want to live that, gangster-like lifestyle. So where there's guns, there's money, there's drugs and things. But yeah, why would they want money? I think any money they'd have would be pocket change, especially if they have, I don't know how much Raglan was going to give him for all those vials of blood, but they've got a lot of leverage that they could use if they ever need cash. But anyway, that's not really the point of this. So yeah, so Raglan sells out Guy, saying, he is more valuable. Having a mind reader is more valuable than having this cash. And of course, Guy's like, oh my gosh, Raglan is such a sellout. He is such a snake. And it was interesting in that moment where, Guy is bargaining for his life, trying to get these guys not to shoot him like they shot Raglan. And he does the mind reading thing on, I think his name is Harris. And he tells a story about how when he was younger, Harris is riding on a horse and he was kind of scared at first, but he said, oh, let it go. And then he rode the horse hands free. And so Harris is like, oh, you are legit. You are legit. And I think that was an interesting experience for Guy, realizing that, you know, the mind reading skill isn't as bad as I've always thought it was. Obviously, it's a lot of information to process. You have your own thoughts, and then you have the thoughts of everybody else around. So at the end, we see him throw out his pills, and I'm assuming that he used those pills for panic attacks and to calm himself down, but I think it would also calm down his brain so he wouldn't hear all that noise, but now he's accepting of it. So he's coming into his own. It's almost like Louis coming into his own at the end of season 2. And we know Doris really helped Guy out. She told him a few times, get out of here. This is a dumb idea. Of course, Guy goes through with it because sometimes Guy likes to make dumb decisions. And so she gets the note to the driver, who sticks checkers on the hotel room, and Checkers does his business very efficiently, dispatching everybody else in the room. So we see at one point she grabs an aerosol can to use. Now, I have seen the trailer for the next episode, so I won't mention it, but I'm still curious as to why. I'm not going to spoil anything. But yes, and she's very much there. And, I'm very glad she helped our guy out. But I would be lying if I said I wasn't a little suspicious of her because she seems to really care for this guy. And yes, she knows he's turning on the Talamasca, but, she doesn't know him. And I think that she thinks he's maybe knows more about Kevis's murder. I don't think she thinks he did it. But I don't think she 100% is doing it for Guy's interest. I think it has to do with her own interest. What exactly that interest is, other than learning what her cousin or her coven member, I can't remember if they're related, but what happened to Kevis, I think she has an ulterior motive. If that's ultimately a good motive, that's fine by me, but I'm wondering if she's a little sinister. Let me know if you have questions about Doris. And kind of going back to Jasper at the end of the entire thing where he puts down that ancient vampire who asked to be put down at the beginning of the episode. And he explains to Guy about how this guy, he's been around for hundreds of years and how we have respect for our elders. Why would a vampire take advantage of this, this poor old vampire man? And so he mercifully, forcefully, and quite grossly decapitates him, but he puts him out of his misery. So we see Jasper has a code. Jasper, I think, he can be trusted. At least he can be trusted enough. We see he's a vampire of integrity and he wants more vampires. And so he says something to the effect of, the Talamasca has been messing with us for forever, for a very long time, to keep us in check. Why do we need to be in check? Maybe they need to be in check and humans need to be in check. And so he wants to make a whole lot more vampires. So I wonder what his ultimate goal is. Well, I know his goal, I just said it, but what he's ultimately going to do with that mission in mind. Now let's talk about Ridge. So Ridge is getting closer to finding out what's happening. So she sees that there's puncture marks on Kevis's body and also Soledad's. And I think before we saw it on Archie's as well. So clearly all these people were attacked by a vampire or something else, So she has to figure out what that is. And we know that she was a little, not suspicious, but knew something was a bit off with Doris and all those women who lived in that boathouse. So maybe she is inclined to believe that, supernaturals do exist. And so she's going to look to find out who could have killed these people. So when she notices that Soledad dropped something off somewhere, she finds it. Inside there is a flash drive, and we see it's a bunch of encryption. I'm curious to know, that could be the 752. Again, it makes more sense to have a book with all that information on the flash drive that could hold a whole lot more. And maybe Doris was telling the truth in that Kevis's book that she had in her bag was just a scrapbook. But that could be the 752 or something related to the 752, because I'm also curious to know if witches have the same kind of law that vampires do, where they can't, or they're not supposed to, write the history of the vampire. well, of the witch in this case? Like, are they allowed to document their life stories? That I would like to know. And yeah, is Doris working with vampires or other supernaturals because she feels a kinship with them? Because they're all, supernatural and they're all under the watch of the Talamasca, who we know she doesn't like. And she always just shows up at the right time. Now, I know, even like thinking back to Interview with the Vampire, it's been said several times that Claudia used to always stalk both Louis and Lestat because she just felt compelled to do it for whatever reason. So, Doris, is she trying to say stop Guy from doing something, or is she just naturally curious, or she always has her antenna up so she just knows where he is and she just follows him? Again, the jury is still out with her. I don't know. I tend to believe that she is more on the altruistic side, looking to help Guy out. But yeah, I have no concrete decisions about her. Not quite yet. So yeah, all in all, I really like this episode. I love that we learn more about the beefs between the different vampires. Jasper really shed a lot of light. I would love to know who was following Helen. What is really going on? What is Doris's real deal? And side note, I need to go to London so badly. It looks like such a cool place to visit. That hotel, that set was beautiful. The clothes were beautiful. The music is so good. They're playing so many good classic 80s tunes, and I love me some 80s tunes. So yeah, those are all my thoughts for Talamasca's 4th episode. I loved to hear all your thoughts. Are you guys enjoying this? I know a lot of people say that they don't like this show because it's not as good as Interview with the Vampire. This is a completely different genre of show from Interview with the Vampire, so I don't really think it's a fair comparison. And just by the very nature of the show, a spy thriller versus, again, watching a show with some supernatural, dramatic, beings like Lestat and Louis and all of them. Like, it's a different ball game altogether. So I guess if you're watching this, I'm guessing you like the show. Let me know. And I'll see you later here on IC Melanie. Again, make sure you like, share, subscribe, hype, all of that. And I will be back later this week with something else, okay? See you all later. Bye.